You will not believe the kinds of rules that govern life in ancient Rome. You think your local parking signs are confusing. Imagine a world where dropping a grain of salt in the wrong temple might offend the gods, or where the type of clothing you wore could decide your social worth. The Roman Empire, shining, organized, grand, was also deeply obsessed with control. Control of behavior, control of morals, control of desire. You might even say Rome ran not on marble, but on rules. But before we begin tonight's story, if you enjoy these calm history stories, please like the video and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your comments means a lot to us. They help us to keep the work on. Your kind words are the biggest support we can get.
Now, dim the lights and let us go back in time, together. It is late evening in the Roman Forum. You stand there, barefoot in your imagination. Marble columns glow faintly in the torchlight. The air smells faintly of olive smoke and iron. Voices echo, layered and distant. Senators arguing, merchants haggling, beggars whispering prayers. Somewhere a fountain splashes softly, its water catching the orange gleam of oil lamps. You breathe in, feeling the dry warmth of the air brush against your skin. You are standing in the heartbeat of the ancient world, but you are also standing in a city of laws. Rome was famous for its legal mind. Cicero once boasted that our laws are our strength. They loved writing, organizing, and perfecting rules. But along with grand ones, the kind that built roads, assigned armies, and shaped justice, came stranger, smaller ones. Laws that told you who could wear purple. Laws that decided what kind of jewelry your wife could own. Laws that could exile a man for kissing his wife in public. Yes, that happened. You might not survive a week in this rule book. At first you might think, how could anyone live like this? But for Romans, law was not just about punishment. It was a reflection of cosmic order. If Jupiter ruled the heavens with thunder, then the Senate ruled Rome with scrolls. Breaking a law, even a small one, meant shaking the balance between mortals and gods. That is why the strangest rules were often born from the strangest fears. Imagine, for instance, a priest counting sacred chickens before a battle. If they refused to eat, the commander had to cancel the entire campaign. You laugh, but in that ritual was a binding legal power. The law of the gods, lex divina, was not symbolic. It was real. If someone ignored the omens and marched anyway, Rome might blame him for every soldier lost. It was a legal superstition wrapped in divine logic. And then there was family law, a realm of endless boundaries. Rome did not only govern the marketplace or the battlefield. It tried to legislate the home, who you could marry, how many children you must have, what kind of food you could serve at dinner. To the Roman mind, discipline started in the family, and the family was a miniature Rome. You glance toward the Palatine Hill, where emperors will one day build their golden palaces. But now, in this early night of history, you sense the first outlines of those laws forming, in whispers, in decrees carved on bronze tablets. Some of them will be reasonable, others will sound utterly ridiculous, and yet each will reveal something about Roman fear and Roman pride. Historians remain divided here. Some say these bizarre rules were tools of control. Others see them as reflections of anxiety about luxury, corruption, and chaos. Rome feared softness. It feared the loss of its old virtues, the hard, simple life of the farmer-soldier. Every strange law you will hear tonight, in some way, tries to protect that myth of discipline, even when it makes no sense. The wind of the forum cools. Torches flicker. You hear the murmur of the crowd thinning as curfew nears. A watchman rattles his spear on the cobblestones, calling for silence. And there you stand, a time traveler surrounded by invisible scrolls of legislation. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the scraping of a stylus as a scribe inscribes another rule onto wax. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will discover what happens to the sacred virgins of Vesta if they break their vow. But for now, as you drift through this moonlit city of marble and madness, you begin to sense the rhythm of Roman law, strict yet poetic, cruel yet strangely logical. Each decree is a thread woven into a web that holds an empire together. So you start walking, slowly, toward the temple fires that never go out. The warmth touches your face, soft and ancient. And you realize, before you can understand the strangest Roman laws, you must first understand this. Rome did not just obey laws. Rome worshipped them. You wake, still in ancient Rome. The air feels cooler now, a pale dawn stretching above the rooftops. The first sounds you hear are distant temple bells, soft as wind chimes. Pigeons stir on the marble cornices, and from a high terrace you can see the flame of Vesta, a steady golden glow that has burned without interruption for centuries. You are standing before one of Rome's oldest and most sacred institutions, and one of the strangest. The Temple of Vesta sits in the heart of the Forum, round and pure, like a white pearl among columns. Inside live the Vestal Virgins, 6 women chosen as children to guard the eternal flame. Their lives are wrapped in ritual, silence, and law. Rome believed that as long as the sacred fire burned, the city would stand. If it ever went out, the empire itself might crumble. No pressure, right? You walk closer. The scent of burning laurel and olive oil fills your lungs. You can hear the faint crackle of the flame. A Vestal moves past you in white linen, her head covered with a soft band of wool. She glances your way for just a second, calm, distant, untouchable. These women were more than priests. They were walking symbols of Rome's purity, as sacred as the flame they tended. But purity in Rome came with a very serious price. Vestal Virgins had to remain celibate for 30 years, not married, not touched, not tempted. And Rome did not take chances with temptation. They lived in a private house behind the temple, the Atrium Vestae, guarded by high walls. No men were allowed inside, not even their own fathers, once they had taken the vow. You can almost hear the whisper of the vow ceremony. A little girl, sometimes only 6 years old, is brought to the temple by her parents. She is chosen by the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. He lifts a small lock of her hair and cuts it off. That simple snip severs her from her family, her class, her future as a wife or mother. From that moment on, She belongs to Rome. It sounds cruel by modern standards, but in their world, it was an immense honor. Vestal Virgins lived free of their father's authority. They could own property, and they were treated with deep reverence. They had front row seats at games. People bowed when they passed. A condemned prisoner, meeting a Vestal on the way to his execution, could be pardoned instantly just by her presence. The law itself bent around them as though the gods walked beside them. Yet beneath that sacred calm ran a darker possibility. What happened if a Vestal broke her vow? Rome believed the offense was not only a sin, it was treason against the gods. To violate a Vestal's chastity meant endangering the whole city. If the flame went out or a storm struck the temple, suspicion immediately turned to them. And the punishment? Burial alive. No blood could be spilled. The purity of their body had to remain untouched, even in death. So Rome devised a cruel compromise. A tiny underground chamber was prepared beyond the city walls, with a bed, a lamp, a loaf of bread, and a little water. The condemned Vestal would be led there in silence, dressed in her sacred veil. The priest would whisper prayers, sealing the tomb behind her, and the city would return to its order, pretending mercy had been shown even as the earth swallowed her. You might shiver at that image, but the Romans did not see it as cruelty. They saw it as cosmic justice, the balancing of a sacred equation. If purity was broken, it had to be restored. It was a strange kind of logic, cold and perfect like marble. The law of chastity was both holy and terrifying, like holding fire in your hands. Historians remain divided here. Some believe the punishments were rare, more symbolic than real. Others argue they were very real indeed, pointing to excavated tombs and old records of trials. The truth likely lies between myth and fear. Rome loved spectacle, even in morality. A few tragic examples were enough to keep every other Vestal in line for generations. You imagine one of them, walking at dusk through the quiet courtyard, her white robe brushing the mosaic floor. She pauses beside the sacred spring, staring at her reflection in the water. Does she feel power or loneliness? Maybe both. She knows that her life belongs to the law, not to herself. She knows she holds the city's fate in her small hands. The flame flickers nearby, gold, alive, delicate. If it goes out, she might be blamed. And if she falters, Rome will bury her to feed the gods. A soft breeze passes through the courtyard, bending the flame but not extinguishing it. You can almost hear her sigh, half relief, half prayer. Somewhere far off, a lark begins to sing, cutting through the morning stillness. Even here, where fear and duty intertwine, beauty still finds its place. One curious side note. When a Vestal's 30 years of service ended, she was free. Free to marry, free to live, free to leave the temple. But many chose not to. After decades of silence and reverence, the world outside must have felt unbearably loud. Some say they stayed near the temple until death, guardians of memory rather than fire. Perhaps peace felt safer than freedom. As the day brightens over the forum, you step away from the temple and glance back. The Vestals move like ghosts between the columns, quiet and graceful. The flame continues to burn, steady as time itself. And you, still a traveler of laws, realize that Rome's strangest rules were never just about control. They were about fear. The fear of losing the gods' attention, of letting chaos slip in through a human weakness. It is a fear as old as civilization itself. The sun has risen now, pale gold pouring over the marble roofs of Rome. You follow a slow procession of citizens moving toward the marketplace. Children run between stalls, vendors shout about figs and olives, and a donkey brays like a trumpet echoing down the stone streets. You feel the warmth of the day gathering and the quiet hum of Roman order beneath it. Here, among the chatter and the color, another strange law once ruled every robe, jewel, and coin. The lex oppia, a law about luxury. It sounds harmless at first, like something about fashion. But when you look closer, it reveals a fierce anxiety beating inside the Roman heart. The story begins during the Second Punic War, the dark years when Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, was burning his way through Italy. Rome was desperate. Men were dying at the front. Gold was vanishing into the war effort. And in that panic, the state decided it had to restrain not only spending, but also pleasure. So the Lex Oppia was born in 215 BCE, proposed by a man named Gaius Oppius. It declared that no woman should own more than half an ounce of gold. No woman should wear multicolored clothing. And no woman should ride in a carriage within the city unless it was a religious festival. You might smile at the idea. A war fought abroad, leading to a fashion ban at home. But to Rome, it made perfect sense. In their eyes, simplicity equaled virtue. Luxury was weakness. Gold, silk, perfume, all were foreign temptations that softened the spirit. And so, even as soldiers froze in the Alps, the women of Rome were asked to share the sacrifice. By giving up adornment, they symbolically gave up comfort. You stroll past a row of stalls selling fabrics. One of them glimmers with imported dyes, Tyrian purple, saffron, and deep indigo. A Roman matron stops to look, her hand hovering over the fabric, and then she quickly turns away. You see the conflict flicker across her face. Pride, duty, and the quiet ache of wanting beauty. For nearly 20 years, the law stayed in force. At first, the people accepted it. But peace came, the war ended, and still, the restrictions remained. The women of Rome began to wonder, if the danger was over, why were their freedoms not restored? And so, one of the strangest protests in Roman history began, led not by soldiers or slaves, but by wives. The ancient writer Livy describes the scene vividly. Women poured into the streets, crowding around the doors of the Senate, begging and pleading for the repeal of the law. Some even stood in the forum, blocking senators from entering, tugging at their togas, demanding to be heard. It was the closest thing Rome had seen to a mass demonstration. Imagine it, a sea of linen and silk, bright voices echoing under marble arches, the hum of a city shocked by female defiance. The senators were scandalized. Cato the Elder, one of Rome's sternest voices, thundered that if women were given their way, they would soon demand equality in all things. He warned that luxury was like a creeping disease. First jewelry, then immorality, then ruin. Others disagreed. They argued that times had changed, that women deserved a share of the peace they had waited for. Historians remain divided here. Some see this as the first Roman women's movement, small but symbolic. Others think it was less about liberty and more about image, a performance of power through adornment. But either way, the streets won. The Lex Oppia was repealed in 195 BCE. That day, the city must have gleamed like a festival. Women once again rode in carriages through the streets, their gold bracelets catching the sun. A gentle rebellion wrapped in perfume and laughter. And somewhere in the shadows, Cato probably ground his teeth in frustration. One curious side note: despite the repeal, Rome never gave up its obsession with luxury laws. Every few decades, another would appear. The Lex Orcia limited dinner guests. The Lex Fania capped spending on banquets. And Augustus himself, centuries later, revived the spirit of Oppia's restrictions with his own moral reforms. It seems Rome never truly trusted pleasure. You walk now through the shade of a colonnade, listening to the city's rhythm. A vendor crushes grapes with his bare hands, red juice dripping into a clay bowl. Children chase each other through the dust, their laughter bouncing off stone walls. And overhead, the faintest breeze flutters a strip of purple cloth, forbidden once, now fluttering free. You wonder how many of those women felt true joy that day. Maybe some simply felt relief, the kind that comes when a small injustice ends. Maybe others knew that freedom always comes with conditions, that the Senate could take it away again tomorrow. Still, for a moment, they reclaimed color, gold, and pride. They reclaimed themselves. In the quiet between footsteps, you hear again the faint whisper of the forum's laws. The Lex Oppia reminds you that even in a mighty empire, control often hides behind virtue. Rome wanted discipline, but it also wanted beauty. And when those two desires collided, it was the women, not the generals, who decided the outcome. The sun climbs higher, glinting on rooftops and armor. The marble under your feet feels warm. You take a deep breath and taste the dust, the grapes, the sunlight. Rome, for all its rules, was still human. It wanted to shine, but never too brightly. The day has grown heavy and bright. You follow a winding alley that dips downhill, where the noise of the marketplace fades into something darker. The echo of music, the murmur of secret laughter, and the faint thrum of drums. Somewhere below the city's marble heart lies a hidden world, one Rome once tried to erase entirely, a law against celebration itself. The ban on the Bacchanalia. You step through the cool shadow of an archway. The air changes here, thick with incense and the smell of crushed ivy leaves. Flickering torchlight dances on the walls, revealing faces painted with wine and mystery. These are followers of Bacchus, or Dionysus as the Greeks called him, the god of wine, freedom, and ecstatic joy. But to the Roman Senate, this joy looked like chaos. The Bacchanalia began innocently enough, as small private ceremonies borrowed from Greek ritual. At first, only women participated, gathering quietly at night to honor Bacchus through song, dance, and shared wine. But over time, the cult grew. Men joined, festivals multiplied. Soon the gatherings were drawing hundreds, even thousands of people. The celebrations stretched till dawn, wild, loud, drenched in wine and abandon. To ordinary Romans, these nights must have seemed both terrifying and thrilling. You pause and listen, the beat of a drum, the rising chant of voices. You imagine the torches spinning, shadows moving like spirits. To the participants, Bacchus promised release from pain, from duty, from Rome's suffocating order. For one night, they could be divine, not disciplined. But the Senate could not stand it. To them, the Bacchanalia were not mere parties. They were conspiracies. Whispers spread that the cult practiced dark rites, secret murders, forbidden unions, oaths sworn in blood and wine. Whether true or not, the panic took hold. Rome feared what it could not supervise. A celebration without permission? That was rebellion. In 186 BCE, the Senate struck back. They issued a decree, the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, effectively banning the cult across Italy. No man or woman could hold Bacchic rites without express permission from the government. No one could gather more than 5 people at once for worship, and anyone caught defying the law faced death. It was not just a ban, it was a purge. The historian Livy describes the chaos that followed. Thousands arrested, temples torn down, leaders executed. It was, he said, the greatest investigation in Roman history. You can almost hear the soldiers' boots echoing through narrow streets, the torchlight flashing against carved stone, as Rome hunted joy itself. Historians remain divided here. Some believe the Senate exaggerated the danger, that the so-called crimes of the Bacchants were political theater, a convenient excuse to reassert control. Others think there truly were violent acts hidden behind the rituals. But whether the rumors were real or not, the fear was genuine. Rome feared what it could not legislate: emotion, intoxication, freedom. You lean against a cold wall and close your eyes. The city hums above, orderly and bright, but down here, the air vibrates with forbidden rhythm. You sense the divide between Rome's marble face and its beating heart, between control and surrender, between law and the wild. One curious side note: centuries later, traces of Bacchic art reappeared in Roman villas. Mosaics of dancing women, painted wine cups, ivy crowns carved into marble fountains. It seems that even as Rome outlawed Bacchus, it could not quite forget him. The god of ecstasy became a ghost who haunted their imaginations. You climb a narrow staircase, returning slowly toward daylight. Above ground, Rome looks spotless again. No ivy, no drums, just sunlit order. A senator passes, wrapped in white, expression carved from stone. You wonder if he too ever longed to dance. Perhaps he once heard the music and felt something ancient stir inside. That small, forbidden spark of freedom. Rome's laws often try to tame desire, but the Bacchanalia showed how easily joy turns into rebellion when caged. When people cannot express their ecstasy, they begin to worship it in secret. And when rulers forbid what makes life vibrant, they plant the seeds of myth. The Senate might have destroyed the Bacchic temples, but it could not destroy the yearning that built them. As you walk through a grove of cypress trees near the Aventine Hill, you hear the faint buzz of cicadas, their rhythm blending with the pulse of the city. The air is heavy with midsummer scent, hot dust, honey, crushed herbs. You think of Bacchus, the god they tried to ban, hiding in the perfume of the earth, laughing softly. Perhaps even now, some Roman matron pours wine for him in secret. Just a sip, just a whisper of defiance. The breeze cools, brushing your hair. You take a slow breath. Rome's strange laws were not only about crime, they were about fear of freedom. The kind that makes hearts too loud, too alive. And in this world of control, even joy had to be licensed. Evening drifts slowly across the city, a deep bronze glow sliding over the roofs of Rome. The air smells of smoke and roasted grain. The chatter of the day fades into softer tones. Footsteps, whispers, the distant strum of a lute. You make your way toward the Palatine Hill, where marble palaces glimmer in the sunset. There, beneath painted ceilings and carved eagles, the Emperor Augustus is writing a law, one that will reach into every home, every marriage bed, and every whispered secret. The Lex Julia de Adulteris Coetcendis, the law on adultery. By now, you already know that Rome loved to regulate everything: food, clothing, festivals. But Augustus wanted more than discipline. He wanted morality itself to become law. In his eyes, Rome's greatness had begun to decay, not from foreign enemies, but from softness, lust, and luxury. If the city was to survive, he believed it had to return to its old virtues: duty, family, and control. And so, with the calm precision of a builder laying bricks, he started legislating the human heart. You walk through a grand hall. Frescoes glimmer on the walls, Venus, Mars, and Cupid entangled in color. The irony does not escape you. Even as Romans decorated their homes with myths of passion, the emperor was preparing to criminalize desire. Under the new law, adultery became not just a sin, but a public crime. Husbands were required, yes, required, to denounce unfaithful wives. Fathers could even kill their daughters if caught in the act of adultery within their own homes. A husband, however, could not kill his wife unless the affair was with a man of low social rank, like an actor or a slave. Otherwise, he was expected to divorce her and publicly announce her guilt. Only then could the law punish her. And punish it did. Exile, loss of property, sometimes worse. The guilty were banished to remote islands, their names whispered only in shame. And the emperor's watchful eyes ensured that even nobles were not safe. No one could hide behind rank or reputation. The law was more than punishment, it was performance. Augustus wanted the world to see Rome purified by example. He envisioned the city as a family, himself as its stern father. But there was an irony that history could not resist. The emperor's own daughter, Julia, became the most famous victim of the very law he created. Julia was witty, beautiful, and restless. everything Rome admired and feared in equal measure. She was accused of taking lovers, of hosting scandalous midnight gatherings on the forum steps, of mocking the very moral code her father preached. When the rumors reached Augustus, he did what he demanded of others. He exiled her, his only daughter, to a barren island in the Tyrrhenian Sea. There, she spent years in isolation, her laughter replaced by the sound of waves and wind. The law had triumphed, but at what cost? You stand by the edge of the Palatine Garden now, watching the torches flicker in the dusk. The air feels heavy, scented with laurel and regret. A woman's laughter echoes faintly down the hill, sharp, nervous, alive. Perhaps someone telling a story about Julia, a warning dressed as gossip. In this city, even whispers had legal weight. Historians remain divided here. Some see Augustus's moral reforms as a sincere attempt to revive Roman virtue. Others call them political theater, a way to disguise control as righteousness. After all, laws about desire are rarely about protection. They are about power. And power in Rome was always public. One curious side note. While women could be prosecuted for adultery, men were judged more gently. The law technically applied to both, but Rome's patriarchal soul bent the scales. A married man who strayed with a slave or prostitute was rarely punished. As long as the act did not threaten another man's household, it was tolerated. In that sense, the Lex Julia revealed not only moral ambition, but also double standards, dressed in marble. You walk along the marble corridor where senators once debated these codes. Their sandals clicked on the floor like distant rain. You imagine them nodding solemnly, speaking of virtue while avoiding each other's eyes. Perhaps some felt relief that their own wives were now under stricter control. Perhaps others felt the weight of hypocrisy pressing against their chests. But no one could say it aloud. The torchlight trembles. You step out into the open air again. The night is rising, violet and silver over the rooftops. A flute plays somewhere, faint and melancholy. In the shadows of Rome's greatest order, you can almost feel the invisible chains of morality tightening. A city that once worshipped Venus now polices love. A world built on passion now fears it. Still, the human heart does not obey edicts. You imagine young lovers meeting in secret gardens, exchanging quiet vows under fig trees, pretending not to hear the distant march of legality. Perhaps they laughed softly, saying, "The emperor can rule the empire, but not this." Rome's strangest laws may have been carved in stone, but love, unpredictable and defiant, was always written in breath. You walk downhill again, the scent of night flowers and old marble around you. The moon rises over the Tiber, pale and calm, reflecting the shape of the Palatine above. Somewhere out there, on her lonely island, Julia might still be watching that same moon, whispering her father's name to the sea. The night deepens over Rome, warm and still, with only a faint breeze moving through the cypress trees. The city that once echoed with laughter now hums quietly, its streets lined with sleeping houses and shuttered shops. You walk toward the field of Mars, where the moonlight brushes across marble tombs, their inscriptions glowing pale as bone. Even here, among the silent dead, Roman law still ruled. Because in Rome, even grief had regulations. It began, as most Roman laws did, with anxiety. The Republic had grown rich, and its citizens, those who could afford to, began turning funerals into displays of wealth. Imagine it, processions that blocked entire streets, hired mourners wailing theatrically, trumpets, dancers, actors wearing wax masks shaped like the faces of ancestors. The dead were becoming celebrities, and the Senate hated it. To a Roman moralist, this spectacle was dangerous. Funerals were supposed to show piety and restraint, not pride. So, in 468 BCE, the first sumptuary laws on funerals appeared. They limited the number of mourners, the cost of clothing, even the use of perfume and spices. Yes, you heard that right. Rome actually set legal limits on how much cinnamon you could sprinkle on a corpse. You pass by a columbarium, a house of ashes, carved neatly into the hillside. Tiny niches hold urns like sleeping doves, each marked with a name, a date, and a few words of love. You imagine a family gathering here at dawn, whispering prayers, their grief measured carefully like everything else in their world. The rules only grew stricter as centuries passed. By the late Republic, the Lex Fania and Lex Aemilia tightened control over funeral banquets. No more lavish feasts for the dead, only modest offerings were allowed. Too much food meant too much pride, and pride was the enemy of virtue. The message was clear: mourn quietly, eat humbly, and do not turn death into theater. But Romans, ever creative, found ways around the rules. Instead of feeding mourners, they fed the poor and called it charity. Instead of gold jewelry, they used bronze gilded in secret. And when perfumes were banned, they burned rare wood that smelled almost the same. Law and imagination danced together, a quiet duel that never ended. Still, the state's obsession with appearance went deeper. Even tombs themselves became a battlefield for virtue. Wealthy families built enormous mausoleums, decorated with statues, inscriptions, even entire gardens of stone. Each claimed to be humble while secretly trying to outshine the others. And so, once again, the lawmakers stepped in. New decrees limited tomb height, decoration, and location. The rich could not bury themselves within the sacred boundary of the city, the pomerium. Death, like everything else, had to know its place. You pause beside a tomb shaped like a small house. Its door is open, the inside cool and echoing. On the wall, a carved epitaph reads, "Do not disturb my bones, or pay the fine." Yes, that was a real thing. Roman law even set monetary penalties for grave tampering, sometimes listing the exact amount, a final act of legal defiance from beyond the grave. Historians remain divided here. Some argue these limits reflected true moral purpose, an attempt to preserve republican simplicity. Others see hypocrisy, the elite preaching modesty while secretly building marble monuments taller than temples. Perhaps both are true. Rome always balanced between virtue and vanity, control and chaos. Its strangest laws were attempts to tame human feeling. And grief, after all, is the wildest of them all. One curious side note: some Romans left instructions for their funerals in their wills, demanding specific songs, jokes, even pranks. A wealthy man named Petronius famously ordered his guests to feast and laugh at his tomb, declaring that joy was the best rebellion against death. You can almost hear it, the music, the laughter, echoing through the cypress trees, while senators elsewhere frowned at the noise. As you walk onward, the moon climbs higher, casting silver across the inscriptions. You notice how calm everything feels here. The still air, the gentle scent of night flowers, the hush of eternity. Even in their attempt to control death, the Romans created beauty. Their laws tried to contain grief, but what they truly did was immortalize it in stone, in ritual, in memory. You stop before one final tomb, a large round one, its doorway guarded by lions carved in marble. It belongs to a freedwoman, her epitaph proud and tender. I was a slave, then free. I earned this place. She, too, lived under Rome's many rules, yet somehow carved her defiance into eternity. Perhaps she saved for years to buy this tomb, to prove she existed beyond the law's reach. Perhaps her bones rest easier, knowing she wrote her own ending. The wind sighs softly through the cypress branches. The torches near the gates flicker, and the stars look down, cold, curious, eternal. You realize that for Rome, law was a kind of immortality. Every rule written was an attempt to outlive chaos, to outthink decay. Even when those laws were strange or cruel, they were also a way to say, we will not vanish. We will stay. You turn away from the field of Mars and walk slowly back toward the glowing city. Behind you, the tombs fade into the dark, their inscriptions still whispering, not of obedience, but of persistence, the oldest law of all. You return to the city just as the first pale light of dawn crawls over the rooftops. The marble glows faintly pink, and the air carries that soft hush before the city fully wakes. But already, you can feel it, the quiet tension that lives beneath Roman order. Laws were not just written, they were performed, paraded, and sometimes weaponized. You are about to see how those strange laws stayed alive, not just in ink, but in whispers, coins, and glances. You pass a forum scribe at his wooden stall, unrolling a wax tablet that gleams like honey. He is copying legal notices, posting fines, and updating lists of those accused. Above him, a sign reads, Tabularium Populi Romani, the record of the Roman people. It is not much bigger than a cupboard, yet it holds the power to ruin lives. Here is where laws became reality, one name at a time. Rome's enforcement machine was intricate and surprisingly human. There were magistrates, the aediles, who patrolled markets, inspecting weights, prices, and public morality. There were lictors, stern men carrying bundles of rods called fasces, symbols of authority and punishment. And then there were the delatores, informers, eager to profit from accusation. They prowled through gossip like sharks in warm water, sniffing out broken laws and selling their discoveries for reward. A spilled secret could make a man rich or destroy a neighbor forever. You step into a crowded market square, the smell of olives and smoke in the air. A aedile in a spotless toga stands beside a bronze scale, checking a fishmonger's weights. His assistant notes down a fine, too little fish, too much deception. Then another official arrives to inspect jewelry on a matron's wrist. The Oppian law might be gone, but its echo still glitters in every bracelet. It is all performance. A city teaching its citizens how to behave by watching them closely. One mainstream historical fact: the censors, the highest moral guardians, kept track not only of property, but of conduct. Every 5 years, they reviewed the rolls of citizens, deciding who stayed in good standing and who was demoted or disgraced. They could strip senators of rank, erase a man's right to vote, or mark his name with infamy. It was not about crime. It was about character. You could lose honor for luxury, vanity, or even bad company. Imagine being legally punished for gossiping with the wrong people. It sounds absurd, and yet perhaps familiar. Rome invented a system where reputation became a legal asset. Lose it, and your world shrank overnight. In a sense, Rome ran on shame. It was more efficient than prisons, more enduring than chains. Still, the Romans needed spectacle. When someone violated the strangest of laws, like adultery, blasphemy, or treason, the punishment had to be seen. You picture a crowd gathered in the forum, eyes fixed on the rostra. The condemned stands alone, pale under the morning sun. Sometimes their property is confiscated. Sometimes they are exiled, the most silent punishment of all. To leave Rome was to be erased from memory, to drift beyond the law's warmth into the chill of nowhere. Yet not all punishment came from above. Social enforcement was just as fierce. A wife caught wearing too much gold might face her neighbor's icy smiles for weeks. A man whose mourning exceeded the legal limit might find no one attends his feast. The law might end on parchment, but its echo lived in rumor. And rumor, as you well know, never dies. You stop near a fountain where two women gossip softly, their voices like ripples in the water. They speak of a senator's daughter sent away for breaking a vow, of another family fined for hosting a forbidden Bacchic feast. Every sentence carries both fear and fascination. Rome's laws were meant to control, but they also entertained. Perhaps that was part of their secret. People love rules, especially when they belong to someone else. Historians remain divided here. Some argue Rome's surveillance was a moral necessity, that it kept corruption from devouring the city. Others see it as paranoia disguised as virtue, a society obsessed with control. You might wonder, listening to these whispers, how different it truly was from our modern screens and records. Perhaps the tools have changed, but the rhythm is the same. Watching, judging, measuring. A curious side note. Some laws were enforced not by magistrates, but by the people themselves. The lex talionis, an eye for an eye, was not just a saying. In minor disputes, citizens were allowed to demand equal retaliation under supervision. Imagine two men standing before a small crowd, one insisting on repayment for a slap, and the other offering a slap in return, legally measured, witnessed by the neighbors. Justice as theater, Rome style. You walk away from the market and into the Subura district, noisy, narrow, teeming with life. Laundry flaps above your head like ghostly banners. Children chase each other between shops. Here, the law feels distant, blurred by laughter and chaos. But even here, informers lurk. Even here, the shadow of enforcement flickers in every alley. You notice graffiti scrawled on a wall. Caius cheated the taxman. Another reads, Livia loves luxury more than the gods. A citizen's complaint or a rival's revenge? Both perfectly Roman. Perhaps those were the truest laws of all, carved not in marble, but in gossip and spite. As the sun climbs higher, the city roars awake. Merchants shout prices, priests chant hymns, and somewhere a magistrate begins another trial. You step back, watching the crowd as it moves like a tide. Each person obeys and resists, fears and flaunts, living proof that law is never just law. It is culture, it is habit, it is story. You realize that every strange Roman rule, from perfume limits to clothing bans, was kept alive by this dance between fear and pride, guilt and laughter. Rome's strength was not in its armies or temples, but in its ability to make obedience feel like belonging. You breathe in the city air, heavy with spice and noise, and you think, perhaps that is the strangest law of all. The evening settles once again over the 7 hills. You wander toward the amphitheater, where the air hums faintly with echoes of old applause. Even when it sleeps, the Colosseum feels awake, an enormous ribcage of stone holding centuries of spectacle. It reminds you of something the Romans understood perfectly, that control and entertainment often shared the same stage. Because for the Romans, the law was never only a list of rules. It was a performance, part courtroom, part circus. To be judged in Rome was to be displayed, measured before the city's collective gaze. Every scandal, every accusation, every rumor was another scene in the endless theater of morality. You are about to walk through that theater now, feeling how the strangest laws of Rome danced between law and spectacle, punishment and story. You step under one of the Colosseum's arches, where marble lions once crouched and spectators once roared. The scent of dust and old rain still lingers here. You can almost hear it, the crowd chanting, the rustle of togas, the snap of banners in the wind. Punishment was not only about guilt, it was about message. A single public humiliation could teach 10,000 people to obey. Imagine it, a nobleman convicted under Augustus's adultery law. He stands before the forum, stripped not of clothes, but of status. The magistrate announces his disgrace, and the crowd murmurs. He is exiled, not to a dungeon, but to an island, where silence becomes the sentence. The onlookers nod solemnly. Tomorrow, they will retell his story, each version slightly more dramatic than the last. And that, perhaps, was the point. Law in Rome depended on memory. It survived not only in scrolls, but in stories whispered across taverns and bathhouses. The punishment of one man became the lesson of 1,000 others. The city itself was the stage, and everyone, senators, slaves, merchants, played their part. One mainstream historical fact: public punishments in Rome often took place in the forum or the circus, where crowds could gather easily. Executions Exile announcements and moral trials were treated as civic events. To attend was not only entertainment, it was citizenship. The Romans believed that witnessing justice made the people stronger, and so, day after day, they came to watch, to judge, to remember. But there was another stage too, the private one. Behind closed doors, people found clever ways to bend these same laws. A forbidden cult might gather quietly at night, lighting candles and singing hymns in whispers. A wealthy woman might sew hidden gold into her dress, unseen by the ediles. A husband and wife, accused of breaking the moral code, might secretly reconcile just to avoid the shame of trial. The law looked powerful, but life always found cracks to slip through. You step out of the amphitheater and follow the sound of laughter toward a nearby tavern. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of bread and roasted garlic. A storyteller leans across a table, his voice smooth with wine. He tells of a senator who fined his own son for throwing too extravagant a party and then attended it anyway. The listeners roar with laughter. Rome adored such tales. The hypocrisy of the powerful was its favorite bedtime story. Historians remain divided here. Some believe these public spectacles genuinely reinforced Roman discipline, a shared ritual of fear and pride. Others think the people came mostly for the thrill, caring little for virtue once the torches dimmed. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe fear works best when it wears a mask of entertainment. There is a curious side note. During the late Republic, many trials were so popular that vendors set up stalls outside the courthouse selling figs, pastries, and roasted nuts. Imagine it, an audience snacking as senators debated adultery or treason, justice as dinner theater. Even Cicero's speeches, those masterpieces of Roman oratory, were delivered before crowds who sometimes cheered, sometimes booed, like at a festival. It sounds absurd, and yet oddly modern. You walk again through the streets, now quiet except for distant music. A faint breeze carries the smell of burning olive oil from a lantern. The city feels softer at night, all marble and murmurs. You imagine how many secrets lived behind these walls. The senator's wife hiding a forbidden letter, the priest whispering a foreign prayer, the slave quietly breaking curfew to meet a lover. Each one, in their own way, defied a Roman law. And yet, Rome endured. That is the great paradox. For all its control, the empire thrived on contradiction. It demanded obedience, but celebrated clever defiance. It punished pleasure, but built monuments to indulgence. It outlawed excess, yet covered itself in gold. And perhaps that is why its story still lingers, not as a perfect order, but as a restless balancing act between rule and rebellion. You pass a fountain carved with the face of a god. Water trickles softly over marble lips, whispering something eternal. You listen, and it almost sounds like laughter, gentle, resigned, ancient. Maybe even the gods found Rome's laws amusing. After all, mortals trying to control desire, grief, vanity. What could be more human or more hopeless? As the night grows quieter, you find yourself back where you began, walking along the Tiber, its black surface reflecting the lights of the city. Each ripple seems to hold a memory, a senator's scandal, a forbidden festival, a whispered confession. The river has seen every trial, every punishment, every secret pardon. It carries them all toward the sea, where law dissolves and only story remains. You stop at the bridge, feeling the faint vibration of life all around, and you think, perhaps that was Rome's final lesson, that no law, however strange, truly lasts, but the people who live under it, the ones who laugh, defy, and remember, they do. The night drifts toward its quietest hour. The Tiber glimmers like a slow-moving ribbon of light, carrying the city's reflections downstream. You walk along its edge, feeling the calm breath of the water and the hum of distant torches, fading one by one. Rome is asleep, but its laws, its voices, its ghosts still murmur softly in the dark. You have walked through the strangest corners of Roman life, from the vows of the Vestals to the perfume limits of the wealthy, from cult bans to censored love. And now, as the city rests, you begin to wonder what all of it meant. Why did Rome, this empire of power and marble, spend so much energy controlling its own people? Perhaps it feared itself. Perhaps the same fire that built its greatness always threatened to burn too wildly. You glance up at the Capitol Hill, its silhouette dark against the stars. Once, senators stood there in white togas, debating the balance between freedom and virtue. Their voices are gone now, but the arguments remain timeless. How much of life can a state command? When does order become obsession? And how strange that these ancient questions still whisper beneath our modern screens and laws. The historian Tacitus once wrote that the more corrupt the state, the more it legislates. It is a bitter line, but also perhaps a compassionate one. Because every strange Roman law, in its own way, was a gesture of fear disguised as control. Fear of chaos, fear of shame, fear of forgetting who they were. You pause at a bridge where ivy curls through the stone. The air smells faintly of rain and fig leaves. A barge drifts beneath you, carrying grain downriver, its torchlight swaying gently. And you realize something beautiful. These laws, however absurd, were part of the rhythm that kept Rome alive. They gave people boundaries, stories, rituals. Even the strangest rules about clothing, love, or mourning created moments of unity. Everyone, rich or poor, knew the lines they had to walk. And sometimes those lines crossed, tangled, and created history itself. One mainstream historical fact: the Codex Justinianus, compiled centuries later under Emperor Justinian, preserved fragments of these ancient laws, cleaned, refined, reinterpreted. What began as scattered decrees became the backbone of European legal systems for more than a millennium. So even now, when you sign a document, stand trial, or hear the word justice, you are touching the ghost of Rome's legal mind. It lingers in every courtroom, in every oath, in every fine print. A curious side note: medieval monks who copied Roman legal texts often added tiny drawings in the margins, lions, dragons, or even jesters. Perhaps they too found amusement in the absurdity of it all. The monks lived in a world of strict rules, yet still smiled at the idea that someone once fined a woman for too much perfume or a man for too many tears. They understood the humor that hides inside order. that quiet human contradiction. You keep walking through the sleeping city, past the ruins of the Forum where owls perch on broken columns, past the baths of Caracalla where moonlight gleams on the marble floors. Each stone feels like a memory. Each shadow holds a story. The wind stirs faintly through the olive trees, and the scent of their leaves reminds you that even empires must breathe. Historians remain divided here, as they always will. Some say Rome's strange laws kept society stable through centuries of change. Others believe they were signs of decay, desperate attempts to mask the empire's moral unraveling. But maybe, in the end, both are true. Order and collapse are siblings, holding hands through history. The very laws meant to preserve Rome also revealed how fragile it truly was. And yet, something in that fragility is comforting, because it makes Rome human again. Not a cold monument of power, but a restless city full of laughter, mistakes, and endless attempts to understand itself. You picture a Roman mother adjusting her child's tunic to make it modest enough for the law. A priest burning forbidden incense, whispering a prayer that no one hears. A senator scratching his head, writing yet another decree to tame the chaos of his time. They were all just people, dreaming, failing, trying to make sense of life. Just like you. You return to the river one last time. The stars shimmer above, reflected in the black water like scattered coins. For a moment, it feels as though the laws, the punishments, the strange decrees, all of it dissolves into silence. What remains is the heartbeat of Rome itself, stubborn, poetic, eternal. You breathe in deeply. The air is cool now, heavy with the scent of stone and sleep. A thought drifts through your mind, that perhaps the strangest law of all is the one we never write. The unspoken rule that every civilization must one day fade into legend. And in that fading, it becomes soft enough to dream about. As your steps slow, the city fades behind you. Only the whisper of the river remains. You think of how far you have walked tonight, through temples and taverns, through funerals and feasts, through laughter and exile. And now Rome finally exhales. Its laws rest at last, not broken, but remembered. The night folds around you gently. Your heartbeat slows with the rhythm of the water. And the story, that long, strange story of rules and rebellion, drifts quietly into the distance. It will wait for you there, in dreams, among marble ruins and starlit arches. Still alive, still whispering. And now, as the final echoes of Rome's voice fade away, you feel yourself sinking into stillness. The torches of the empire dim, and only the soft shimmer of moonlight remains. Silver against the water, silver across your thoughts. The long corridors of history grow quiet. The marble turns to mist. The voices of senators, priests, and dreamers melt into the night. Each strange law you heard tonight, the vows, the perfume, the punishments, they all dissolve into the same calm hush. A hush that feels like sleep. You breathe slower now. The air tastes faintly of rain and old stone. It carries no judgment, no decree, only peace. Perhaps that is the final lesson of Rome, that beyond all rules, all empires, all fear of chaos, there is always this moment of stillness, the moment when you let go. Somewhere far away, the Tiber continues to flow, carrying the last fragments of parchment and story out to sea. Above it, the stars remain exactly where they have always been, watching empires rise and fall without a sound. You listen, and you can almost hear them breathing with you. You picture yourself walking once more along the empty streets, each step slower, softer, lighter. A stray cat darts past an old temple. An olive branch sways in the night air. Even the stones beneath your feet seem drowsy now, as if they too have earned their rest. Your thoughts drift backward, to the Vestals, to the senators, to the quiet faces that once obeyed or defied. They are all dust now, but their stories remain, woven into the soft hum of human memory. You realize that, in some gentle way, you have carried them with you tonight, and that is enough. Let the last image be this: a quiet Roman garden at dawn, a marbled statue covered in ivy, a bird taking flight into the pink light of morning. The world begins again, as it always does, beyond law, beyond judgment, beyond fear. You let the image fade. You let the night close softly around you. You are safe. You are calm. And the story is done. If you enjoyed this calm history story, please do not forget to like the video and subscribe. Sweet dreams.